The rain hammers the jungle canopy like 1,000 tiny fists. The sound is deafening, turning the dirt path into a treacherous river of brown mud. James and Diep are running. The beautiful white parachute dress is gone, carefully packed away. Diep is back in her dark, practical clothes, but her movements are slow. She is exhausted. They scramble up a slippery slope. James grips Diep's hand, pulling her up with all his strength. He pants, his chest heaving. He looks back. The forest is a wall of gray mist. No one is visible yet, but James knows they are being hunted. "Faster," James whispers, wiping rain from his eyes. "We need cover." I can't," Diep gasps, clutching her belly. She slips on a mossy root, her knees buckling. James catches her instantly. He wraps his arm around her waist, taking her weight. He sees the terror in her pale face. The joy of the wedding dress has evaporated, replaced by the cold reality of survival. He scans the terrain. He spots a small fissure in the rock face, hidden behind a thick curtain of vines. A small, dry cave. "In there," James points. He helps her squeeze through the narrow opening, then carefully rearranges the vines to conceal their hiding spot. Inside, the cave is cramped and smells of wet earth, but it is dry. James wraps his soaked outer shirt around Diep's shivering shoulders. "Are we safe?" she asks, her teeth chattering. "For now," James says softly. He sits near the entrance to keep watch. He pulls out their only heavy-duty flashlight. He clicks the switch. Nothing. He hits it against his palm. Dead. The bulb is shattered. "Broken?" Diep whispers. Now we are in the dark. James stares at the useless metal tube. Most men would throw it away. But James is an architect. He sees potential. He unscrews the cap and pulls out the battery housing. Inside, coiled around the core, is a spool of thick, high-quality copper wire. It gleams red gold in the dim light. James looks at the wire, then at Diep's hand. She is rubbing her empty ring finger. He remembers her words. "I don't need a ring." He makes a decision. "James," Diep asks, "can you fix it?" "I am repurposing it," James says quietly. "Something better than light." He uses his multi-tool pliers to pull the copper coil free. He strips off the insulation with his knife, revealing the raw, bright metal. Now he has 2 feet of pure, shining copper. "Sleep, Diep," James says gently. "Let me work." James begins his work with the obsession of a master jeweler. He cuts 2 lengths of wire. He doesn't just wrap it around a finger. He wants a masterpiece. He anchors one end of the wire around a small twig and begins to twist. Twist, loop, pull. He braids the copper wire into a Celtic knot, an infinite loop with no beginning and no end. It requires immense finger strength. The stiff wire digs into his skin, leaving red marks. His fingers are raw. The metal leaves a sharp smell on his hands. But he doesn't stop. He focuses on the pattern, weaving his promise into the metal. He bends the braided wire into a circle, measuring it against his own pinky finger. Roughly the size of Diep's ring finger. He uses the flat side of his knife to hammer the weave flat, locking the pattern in place. Hours pass. The rain outside turns to a drizzle. James picks up fine sand from the cave floor. He uses it as a polishing paste, rubbing the copper ring furiously with a piece of cloth. Rub, rub, rub. Slowly, the industrial copper changes. The oxidation disappears. Under the faint light, the metal starts to shine. It glows with a warm, reddish hue. It looks exactly like rose gold. James holds it up. It catches a stray beam of light, sparkling like it has diamonds embedded in the weave. He takes the remaining wire and makes a second ring, larger, simpler, a strong, thick band for himself. The rain stops completely. The sun sets, painting the sky in bruises of purple. James finishes the last polish. His hands are stained dark, but the rings are pristine. He walks over to Diep. She is awake, staring blankly at the wall. Diep, James whispers. She jumps. James, is the flashlight working? No. James kneels on the hard stone floor. I couldn't fix the light, so I made something that shines forever. He takes her left hand. Her fingers are cold. Look at me, he commands softly. Diep turns. She sees him kneeling. She sees his tired eyes burning with intensity. He opens his scarred hand. In his palm, 2 rings glow with the color of sunset. Rose gold, intricate, eternal. Diep gasps. Her hands fly to her mouth. James, is that gold? Copper, James smiles tiredly. From the flashlight, but to me it's worth more than all the gold in my bank accounts. He picks up the smaller braided ring. It conducts heat, James explains, his voice raspy. Just like you conduct life into my heart. He slides the ring onto her finger. It fits perfectly. The braided pattern sits elegantly on her hand, shining against her skin. It looks like high-end jewelry. I wove it tight, James whispers, so it will never break, like us. Diep stares at the ring. She traces the infinite loop of the braid. She realizes he spent hours twisting this hard metal just to see her smile. Diep chokes back a sob. It's better than the diamond. That was bought with money. This was bought with time. He hands her the larger ring. Your turn. Diep takes the ring. Her hands shake. She grabs James's hand, the hand that protects her, the hand covered in cuts. She slides it onto his finger. It rests there, solid and heavy. With this ring, Diep whispers, I take you, James Nguyen, my architect, my protector, to be my husband. And I take you, James grips her hand, Diep, my home, my future, to be my wife. They kneel in the dirt, 2 fugitives with nothing but copper rings on their fingers. You may kiss the bride, James murmurs. He leans in. His lips brush hers, soft, gentle, a promise of peace. Snap. A dry branch breaks outside, loud, close. James breaks the kiss instantly. The lover vanishes. The soldier returns. He blows out the candle. Darkness swallows them. Stay behind me, James breathes, his hand moving to his knife. The honeymoon is over. The hunt is back on. The cave is plunged into absolute darkness. The only sound is the ragged breathing of 2 terrified people and heavy, wet footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. James presses Diep against the cold stone wall. He covers her mouth gently with his hand, signaling for silence. His other hand grips his knife, but he knows a blade is useless against a hunting party. He needs a distraction. He needs a miracle. He looks down at the debris on the cave floor, the remains of the tactical flashlight he destroyed to make the rings, the plastic casing, the shattered lens, and the heavy lithium-ion battery. The architect's mind kicks into overdrive. He doesn't see trash, he sees chemistry. He knows lithium is highly reactive. If the casing is punctured and exposed to moisture, it creates intense heat and sparks. It's a primitive, dangerous flashbang. James picks up the battery. It feels heavy, like a grenade. The footsteps stop at the cave entrance. A beam of white light cuts through the vines, sweeping across the cave floor. It misses their feet by inches. Check inside, a rough voice growls in Vietnamese. James kisses Diep's forehead, a silent promise. Trust me. He moves toward a small puddle of rainwater near the entrance. He places the battery on a rock. He raises his knife. The vines part. A silhouette steps in. James strikes. He drives the tip of his knife into the battery casing, puncturing the seal, and kicks it into the puddle. Hiss! Boom! A violent chemical reaction erupts. A blinding white flash of burning lithium fills the confined space, accompanied by a cloud of acrid smoke. My eyes! The intruder screams, stumbling back, blinded by the intense magnesium white flare. James doesn't hesitate. He is a shadow moving through the chaos. He lunges low, tackling the blinded man at the knees. He doesn't kill him. He disarms him with a precise twist and shoves him hard against the rock wall. The man slumps, unconscious. "Diep, run!" James roars, grabbing her hand. They burst out of the cave, coughing, smoke trailing behind them. "He's here! Flank left!" Voices shout from the trees. James pulls Diep down a muddy ravine. They slide, tumble, and crash through ferns and thorns. The jungle tears at their clothes, but James doesn't let go of her hand. The copper ring on his finger digs into her palm, a hard, reassuring presence. "The river!" James gasps. "We have to cross!" They reach the bank of a swollen, rushing river. The water is black and angry, churned up by the storm. It blocks their path completely. "James, I can't swim in this!" Diep cries, looking at the white foam. "It's too strong." "We don't swim." James points to a fallen tree trunk that spans the narrowest part of the gorge. It's slick with moss and rain, a bridge of death. We walk. Something snaps in the bushes behind them. They are running out of time. "Go!" James shoves her onto the log. "Don't look down! Look at my back! Only my back!" Diep steps into the trembling log. She balances precariously. Below her, the black water roars like a beast waiting to swallow them. She feels dizzy. Her pregnant belly throws off her center of gravity. "I'm falling!" she screams, swaying violently. James spins around on the slippery wood. He doesn't grab her arm. He grabs her face, forcing her to look at him. "Look at me!" he commands, his voice cutting through the panic. "Look at the ring!" He holds up his hand. The copper band glints in the moonlight, breaking through the clouds. "This circle doesn't break," James shouts over the river's roar. "We don't break. One step. Breathe. One step." Diep locks her eyes on the copper ring. It is her anchor. She takes a breath. She takes a step, then another. They move across the abyss, a terrifying dance of balance and trust. When they reach the other side, James pulls her onto the solid bank, just as the log, weakened by the current, snaps and crashes into the water below. They collapse in the mud, gasping for air. Safe. The river is now a wall between them and the hunters. James crawls over to Diep. He checks her frantically. "Are you hurt? The baby?" "I'm okay," Diep whispers, trembling from adrenaline. "We made it." James pulls her into a crushing hug. He buries his face in her wet hair. He is shaking too, not from fear but from the relief of not losing her. The clouds part fully. A full moon rises over the jungle, bathing the world in silver light. They sit by the riverbank. James reaches down to the water and washes the mud off his hands. He takes Diep's hand and washes hers too. The mud washes away, revealing the rings. Under the moonlight, the copper shines brilliantly. It doesn't look like scrap metal anymore. It looks ancient, noble. The rose gold hue is deep and rich, forged in the fires of their struggle. James twists the ring on his finger. He feels the weight of it. It's heavier than the platinum band he used to wear as a CEO. "We had no priest," James says softly, staring at the water. "No vows." Diep sits up. She wipes a smudge of dirt from his cheek. She looks like a warrior queen, battered but unbroken. "We don't need a priest," she says. "We just crossed a river of death on a twig. That was our vow." James smiles. It's a real smile reaching his eyes. "I, James Nguyen," he whispers, holding his hand up to the moon, "promise to build you a fortress. Maybe not today, but I will build it. And I, Diep," she places her hand against his, their copper rings clinking softly, "promise to live in it with you, even if it's just a cave." James kisses her hand, right over the braided copper knot. "Happy wedding day, Mrs. Nguyen." "Happy wedding day, Mr. Architect." They sit there for a moment longer, two tiny specks in the vast wilderness. They are wet, cold, homeless, and hunted. They have no money, no allies. But as James looks at the cheap copper wire wrapped around his finger, he realizes something profound. He has never felt richer in his entire life. He stands up, pulling Diep with him. The danger hasn't passed, but they are no longer just running away from death. They are running toward a life. "Let's go," James whispers, his grip tightening on her hand. "The honeymoon suite is waiting." "Where?" Diep asks, looking at the dark jungle. James points to a distant ridge, where the first hint of dawn is beginning to bruise the horizon. "Forward," he says. "Always forward." They turn and disappear into the shadows, leaving only two sets of footprints in the mud, side by side, marching into the unknown.
Diêm và Diệp trốn vào một hang đá giữa mưa rừng, nơi Diêm phá chiếc đèn pin để lấy dây đồng, lặng lẽ đan thành hai chiếc nhẫn cho cả hai. Trong bóng tối, họ quỳ xuống nhau trao lời hứa làm vợ chồng những chiếc nhẫn đồng giản dị, đắt giá hơn mọi kim cương. Nhưng khoảnh khắc thiêng liêng nhanh chóng bị cắt ngang khi kẻ săn tìm đến. Diêm dùng pin tạo vụ nổ chói mắt đánh lạc hướng, kéo Diệp chạy xuyên rừng và đối mặt với con sông dữ trên thân cây trơn trượt bắc qua khu vực. Diêm dùng chiếc nhẫn làm điểm tựa tinh thần giúp Diệp vượt qua nỗi sợ. Khi sang được bên bờ bên kia, cả hai kiệt sức nhưng an toàn. Dưới ánh trăng, họ rửa tránh bùn đất, nhìn nhẫn lấp lánh và nhận ra dù nghèo đói và bị săn đuổi, họ vẫn giàu có nhất vì có nhau.